Okay, and we're not live.
We're not live, but we are recording.
Here we are. Okay, so welcome to podcast 3 of the Frank Frazetta podcasts. And we had technical issues, so you'll be watching this after the event. And we have wonderful Sarah Frazetta in the room. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. Hello. Nice
And
to be back.
the ever patient Sarah. The ever patient Sarah. And we have
You're
Chuck.
only on episode 3. You're fine. You're episode 10, and then we're going to put you in the hot water.
Yeah, no. Oh, I expect it. So we have Chuck and we have Rachel and Melanie and Corey, and everyone's particulars are under the screen at YouTube here when you see this. If you want to check out everyone's work, wonderful artists, and the wonderful Sarah Frazetta needs no further introduction. Now, what I'm going to do today is some draw-overs of Frank's great work, and I'm going to allow everyone in the room to really choose pictures. I've chosen one because it's one of my favorites, but I also want to show the new book has come through. Fantastic Worlds of Frank Frazetta. Look at that beauty. It's so gorgeous, just the weight of it. When I'm in a nursing home, I'm going to need some help, maybe 2 employees, 2 staff members to open this for me so I can continue to look through this. I've already been down in the garden about 6 times because I like my lovely peaceful space to sit and pore over this book, which I'll do after this recording as well. So absolutely beautiful stuff. Worth it for the black and whites alone. So beautifully reproduced. I haven't seen these reproduced so well before. The black and whites are just amazing. And these
they did a great job with the inks, for sure. I love that. Yeah, the whole spread of the old comics.
Yeah,
his old comic work never really got the attention, and now in the Taschen book, that has surely changed.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, Sarah, because I remember someone said something astonishing once it was just a debate. You know, you got the Frank Frazetta Roundtable and stuff on. If you don't know that, go and check it out. The Frank Frazetta Roundtable, and someone said he'll be remembered mostly for his black and white work, and I went, "You just hold your coach there. What are you talking about?" You know, because all I was about was his artwork, his paintings. And then the more I looked at the Canaveral stuff, I started to realize what he meant. He had, at that point, had honed his craft so well. You know, to pull out something like this was amazing. And so as an artist, looking back with reappraisal, it was astonishing. So he probably put even more time into the black and white, honing his craft in black and white than he did in his paintings. Because by the time he did his paintings, he was older and less, worried about deadlines and less worried about making a living at it, to the point where he did less of it over a longer period of time. Whereas this stuff, it's like, when people go on tour in a rock band, they're at their peak by the time they get to Japan, because they've been doing it every single night and they're brilliant at it. And I feel that that's what Frank was. He was just brilliant at all of this stuff. Like you say, we never see as Johnny Comet or anything like that. Not the broad, fan base rarely sees that stuff. But the
cross hatching and all of his Johnny Comets, it's insane. And I think it was both like a 20-year span of when he was he started in his 30s with oil painting. He probably started inking, as soon as he started working in comics. So for about 15 years, he was inking. But like you said, he was putting out so much more work at the time because of what comics demand. But the ink brush always, until he was his last days talking about art, inking was his favorite by far.
Oh, was it? Oh, no, that's a new insult. I didn't know that. I guess it's therapeutic. You're sitting there and you're not worried about color choice or mixing colors. You just got your pot and one brush or one pen. I can imagine that. And the only time I saw Frank do anything at all as far as the artistic process being recorded was when he drew that little cat in Painting with Fire. And you could see that he was great. You could see he was just loving sitting there. The joy of just being in an armchair and drawing on a piece of paper. It's right back to your childhood again. It's right back to, why did we start this? Is because it was such beautiful, just such a relaxing thing.
I really wish they would have recorded him more. I mean, that was obviously his left hand that he was drawing with in the painting with fire. And it's interesting how he still made it look so easy with his left hand. But watching it from my perspective, because I knew my grandpa so well, I saw like he was very anxious in that clip. And then like kind of like, oh God, yeah, I could tell he did not want to be filmed just because he was so insecure about the speed he was going and drawing. Because I mean, what he could have done that with his right hand in, I don't know, 30 seconds. And that took him quite a while. So I could see that angst in him. And I'm like, man, but I what I admired about it was I was like, he still let them do that for the sake of history. And so everyone could see a little bit of insight. But I can't help but think, why didn't they do a documentary sooner in the 70s on him? Someone should have started recording. What a shame.
Yeah. And now on that topic though, Sarah, I remember, I don't know if he's been bombastic or not, but Doc Dave, when he was sort of vocal on the internet, I haven't heard from him in years, but he said he had footage of Frank painting. Do you know anything about that?
He did say that. He said that for many years, and yeah, he's kind of fallen off the face of the earth. I don't know what happened to him, but he claimed to have hours and hours of my grandpa painting, and I don't know why he would want to keep that from the world.
Yeah,
it's a shame if it's true.
Yeah, I badgered him like crazy because if someone's going to say they've got,
did you?
Yeah, if someone says they've got footage of Frank Frazetta painting, I'm not going to go, oh really, and then go and make a cup of tea. I'm going to.
I don't really believe it at this point. I just don't, because I'm like, well, we would have seen it by now. We would have at least tried to sell it to us by now.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking. Was he being bombastic? Because where is it? I mean, that's gold. It has to be, when you
gold.
I mean,
gold, when that's no, you have to share it. Or be like, I don't know, like just flaunting it around at least. You don't have to share it, but just be proud of it and make something from it. But that 7-minute clip that came out of my grandpa from the interview with L. Ron Hubbard, writers of the Galaxy, writers of the future out in California, when they released that clip, I mean, that was like the fans. I've watched that clip so many times, and it was just like so surreal to be able to see him at that point of his life when he was so articulate and charismatic and could explain how he worked and how he saw art. I mean, so. And that would have been around the same time, a little bit later, but I think Dave started hanging out with my grandpa in the mid 80s. Yeah. So it would have been around that same time, the footage, if it does exist.
Yeah.
We'll see.
That was when Frank was in his tux? Is that the clip you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, that was 88, I think. 88 when he went out there.
Yeah.
The year I was born.
What a handsome man. What a handsome man he was. Just sitting there, Movie star looks.
So handsome.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like to think I model myself and Frank in every single way, but I just couldn't beat that.
You're beautiful.
I'll go
put
get
a little tux and you're there.
Little tux.
You could Patrick, you definitely could be in movies. You look like you'd be like an actor over an artist, actually, now that you mention it. So you have that in common with Frank. Yeah, no, you do. I would want to put you in a movie. Like, he's got interesting. I like him.
Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Well, let me share. Well, Chuck could be in the movies. Look at him. Let's go and
Chuck. I already thought about that with Chuck too. Chuck's got something going.
I got my haircut today just for this.
I was going to compliment you on that. I was going to say, Chuck, did you get your haircut?
I thought you were going to razz me about it.
No,
Chuck, it's the way you look into the camera. It's like, oh, it's interesting. I like it.
All right. Now, before pre the recording, we were having a look at this. Frank Frazetta up close. This is from the Heritage Auctions. And this is just beautiful to be able to see all the weave. And I had a collector once say to me, I've got your piece here, because they were used to looking at paperback jackets and stuff. And he said, I can see all the bits, I can see the canvas and stuff. And I said, yeah. And he says, there's a brush hair in here. I says, that happens, that's just part of the painting process. And there's a Frank Frazetta, actually. It's the one where he's swinging the axe. What's that one, Sarah? Can you bring it out? I could say it a million times and it's just gone out of my head. Is it the Destroyer where he's fighting the
Yes.
the horde? Yeah. And I saw that up close in the museum. And you can see bits of dog hair and Frank's slipper. You can see all kinds of thing in there. And I said, they just airbrush that out for the boot jackets. So it's interesting to go up close and see, that's what a painting is. You've only got to scratch it with your, if you wear a ring, you can scratch the surface if it's glazed and get a line like this. But really beautiful. I actually might draw over this because I was talking earlier with the guys here about this tiger. And, people say that Frank, he says he draws from imagination. And I know he does. And he used reference, and I know he does. As an artist, you can see when and when not that happens, usually anyway. And even if he did use photographic reference, there's no sign that anything was traced verbatim ever in any of Frank's work. Now let's have a look, because it wouldn't have Frank's style then. And that's a caution for everyone that wants to find their style. If you just trace verbatim, you're not going to have a style. You'll have a photographic style, and that's what everyone has. So, all the tracers look the same for that reason. Doesn't mean you can't go in, because I was talking to students. There's a lot of artists that in the commercial world, they trace anyway. It's for the deadlines. There's nothing else they can do about it. And this recording is still blinking. I wonder if it always did that and I didn't notice. Maybe I'm just getting paranoid.
I think it has always recorded in blinked when it's recording.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's have a look in here. Now, why is this not happening? Oh, right. Hold on a second. There we go. One button. That's all it took. So I got all this newfangled stuff. There it is. Didn't turn the button on. So for all you tracers out there, we were talking about this, Chuck, remember? If you had photographic reference, if you're going to trace and you want to find your style, what I would say is try to work out how you would draw if you didn't trace, and trace that way, if that's what you're going to do, just until you learn enough to let go of the tracing. So for me, you want to do this. You want to find the lines like that, and then find maybe the hips like this, and come down to find these moments like that and draw through, learn the craft. And find these little, like the ovoid, be aware of things. Like Frank was very aware that the head is an ovoid. It's not a square, it's not a round, it's an ovoid. It's this, and it gets wider just above the ears here. And then everything just fits in. So halfway down to the nose, and halfway down again to the chin for the bottom of the bottom lip. And then you've got this. And what you have now is this too peaky. And for a female figure, that's fine. But you want to sort of oval that off now, like this, to start finding basically what makes a character work. And a generic moment where you can just keep on changing that until you get many different faces. And I loved Frank's little Cupid faces, and this little Cupid's bow, this used to be called back in the 1920s. And I think this is a moment of transition where you see that Frank was born a long time ago. Frank was born and grew up watching movies with the likes of Clara Bow in it. Clara Bow. Do you know? I've never heard. So Clara Bow was the Julia Roberts of the 1920s.
Wow.
If you put Clara Bow up on a movie screen, it would just be round the block, people queuing up to see Clara Bow. And she had that look. She had that little bee sting look like this. So mods,
yes, she does.
Yeah.
She does.
Mods were considered attractive back then when they were small. And then that changed, Now mods are considered like a big bottom lip and a big top lip. You remember the 90s when people were injecting their faces until they had pillows for lips. So there was different.
Oh, they're doing that now.
Is it still happening?
Yeah, we need to go back to the small lips for my selfish reasons.
Selfish reasons.
Yeah, because my lips are not getting injected, and they're going to get smaller. That's life.
You're gorgeous. It looks the most painful thing of all. But here's I think that was part of what made Frank's work that he would take maybe an inspiration from the movies and put it in his work, and then take another inspiration like Jack Palance was in the movies back in the 40s and 50s. So you can trace it back to what was in the movies when Frank was watching movies to see how much he
Definitely.
loved movies, because it comes across in his work. And me too. I grew up with Sophia Loren. I love Sophia Loren, even though she was even a bit before my time. When I was growing up, television was huge, and so I'd watch all the old Hollywood movies on there. And for some reason, there was a whole season of Sophia Loren, and I just fell in love with her look. So that's inspired me. And she was a
You
whole
have good
different thing.
taste.
Yeah,
Sophia Loren. Oh, wow.
she was
She's
fantastic.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, so Sophia Loren had the big lips here, and she had the big square jaw. She was really the beginning of, what news anchors look like today. She was less of a prepubescent kind of look, and more of a woman in her powerful, on stage presence. She was always powerful. People were frightened of Sophia Loren, and they might have been a
Yeah,
bit.
those eyes. I mean, those are intimidating eyeballs. She
She
looks through you if she looks at you.
Yeah, well, I remember in an Italian movie. I think that's when I fell in love with her. Is all these guys were trying to, woo her and stuff, and she just booted them out of she just booted them out of the way. And I thought, wow, she's brilliant, isn't she? I'm a bit frightened of her, but there's something very attractive in that. And I remember shouting at one guy. She threw all his clothes out a window, and she shouted out, "Bastardo!" I went, wow, I can speak Italian now. It was wonderful, and I thought, wow, you can swear in the 1950s. But I think it's because it was Italian they were allowed to get away with it. And I loved
Yeah.
it. So,
Oh,
so that's when I see there with Frank. And this is we were talking, Sarah said, probably her number one. And I responded with it as my number one. This is my number one favorite painting. It's not the one I go to find everything I need from Frank. I go to the Destroyer for that one, because I think the Destroyer has every single thing, that every technique that Frank ever honed was in the Destroyer piece. But as far as beauty and composition, I know Frank liked Cat Girl, but for me it was this. This was the one for me. I just loved it, and still do, and always will. Always will. And Rachel said she saw for the first time the hand here. And that's true. You don't see this stuff in repros. And that's why this big book is so impressive, is that we're starting to see the artwork almost in size, almost, because Frank's work was quite small, almost to the size, almost on that big book. So beautiful. And even look at the hand, just how much beauty and gesture is in there. You'll never get that from a photograph. This is
no.
Frank taking any reference he might have had and then enhancing it to this point like this. Beautiful. If you're not going to draw an elegant hand on a female figure, there's no point at all. You can't just put big catcher mitts in there. It has to be a beautiful thing. And the beauty of everything that Frank does here is just gorgeous. I just love it. Just playing along there and just feeling what Frank felt there is gorgeous. And this is the joy of being an artist. As you're an artist, you can go over other artists' work and see what they did, what was their thing. These are quite voluptuous breasts there. I'm feeling that's really quite a heft, a weight there. So part of me sort of hesitated drawing over the top of there, because it's not what I normally do. And this beautiful stuff. So it's wonderful as an artist that's gone through my own path to go over the top of Frank's work and feel what he felt, and realizing that I'm doing that too now. I'm starting to feel through the knowledge of anatomy what would be the choices I would make. That pinch there of the obliques, such a brave thing to do.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where does the sartorius start right there?
The sartorius is going to start. See that moment there where you see that bing right there?
Yeah.
So the sartorius is just going to disappear underneath here like that. So
Okay.
you've got a tiny little bit of the adductors, but it's going to be mostly a guinal ligament. We're getting into really tight anatomy there. So at the minute, I'm feeling a little bit of this. When you strain your stomach, you'll get, if you do get a hernia, it'll be right there. You'll get a ball, a lump that happens there. So right in here is the adductors, and the sartorius is just hidden and goes around behind and disappears into that ether there. And then if you get the pubic hair and swing across, then you get the great trochanter. It just shows you that he has it all. You know, it's got it all.
Yeah.
Everything's just exactly what we would expect coming down to the biceps femoris there. He has hidden the leg down here in sfumato. So I often talk about sfumato. And sfumato is basically, it means mist. And it's a way of creating an atmosphere so that you don't linger everywhere. Sorry, you don't pinball across the picture and keep getting distracted by other things. You'll get this mist and it'll bring you back up to what's important up here. And he was the master of that. He was the master of look here, not here. So look,
It's kind of funny. You don't even notice she doesn't have a leg, and then
yeah,
so like
Never.
I didn't even. I've usually only see this as like a small image. So there's a lot about this that I didn't notice before.
yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. Well, even this, this inspired me forever. The fact that he didn't just think, here's a costume figure. He thought, here's a figure, and here's an extension of the figure as far as design's concerned. So he would take the figure here and go, oh, it's flowing so beautifully. It's flowing so beautifully in this direction. Can I continue the flow down to here? And how would I do that? And just organically off he went into the world of this. That was a masterstroke for me. When I saw that long moment there, I thought, when would you have the opportunity to get that kind of flow? Someone would have to be on a plinth or on steps. It was like everything was just coming together magically. But that doesn't happen. That only happens if you are 100% in the moment and you're going, I want this, and I'm going to make this happen. And the way to make that happen is to make it happen. And that's what he did. He went, I'm going to continue this flow. And just being the natural that he was, in concert with all of the stuff he had done before, all that Johnny Comet stuff, and all that stuff that he was not even heralded for because he was ghosting, which was the Al Cap stuff. The Al Cap stuff, it was beautiful. And that must have been really painful. If you don't know what a ghost artist is, it's basically, I did it myself a few times. A ghost artist is when someone comes in and does the work for the artist that has got too much on their plate or is just tired of it. And a lot of the time, the ghost artists are better than the artists. And so Frank would ghost Al Cap. And what a painful thing that must have been for Frank, because I know he had a proud persona, to do all that beautiful work. And then Al Cap comes in and just signs his name at the bottom of it. And there's no sign of Frank at all. And that's the non-disclosure agreement. It's never to be said. I think it can be said after the fact. But at the time, Al Cap, to the general public, did all that wonderful work that was Frank Frazetta's. And so with Frank having all of that mileage, when he came in to paint like this, then he was able to do that. Working in comic books and panels is an amazing training ground for anyone that wants to paint fluidly. And that's where he, I believe, came out as great as this from all of that mileage. It wasn't just suddenly in his 30s, I'm going to paint something. All of that mileage was in there and ready to go on the canvas. But what does astonish me is that he was able to, in his 30s, start painting. And you can see the growth in practically in seconds, Oh no. Let's get back in.
Patrick, while you're getting back in, I just have to say that was so beautifully said. I'm gonna go back and have to quote you. Write it down exactly how you just said it. It was beautiful.
Thanks, Sarah. No, I love his work so much.
Yeah, that was really well put. I'm gonna give you one more compliment and tell you how good that was. I am gonna go back and watch this and write it down. You'll
Thank
see.
Well, at any point, just ask questions, Sarah. This is because we don't have the live audience now. You guys are the questionnaires. So please ask plenty of questions as we go. Why isn't that opening in Photoshop? Let me see. Open with. If I can grab it and drag it into Photoshop. Corey, can I drag this into Photoshop? I've learned help.
Yeah, you should be able to. If you open image as a open image as a new tab, you should be able to drag it.
Yeah. Nice, Corey. I know Corey knows everything. I haven't pushed Corey.
It's only the things I know. That's it.
It's only the things you know. There's that Canaveral Press stuff that I was talking about. And yeah, I was just looking to see if we could see the moment when Frank changed and became this master of paint. And it was, we talked about it before, Sarah. I mean, this is an early painting here. And I know that it's Chuck's favorite. And it's reproduced beautifully in the book, as best as I've ever seen it. Even better than this.
Yeah,
The best
they did a great job with that one.
The best
Yeah.
you usually get is on the internet because there's no 4-color printing to mess it up. But they did it perfectly in the book for that one. And I always thought this one was just not loved enough. I mean, sure, it's loved, but you never see it as much. And I just always loved it. I thought it was fantastic.
That one's a masterpiece, and he thought so too. That was one of the pieces that he kept in his collection and didn't sell because he thought so highly of it. It's so small. I think that canvas is, oh God, 4x6, very, very small.
What? Really?
It's
yeah, it's so small.
Yeah, 6x8. 6x8.
That's unbelievable.
8,
That's
8 by
practically
10. Yeah, it's tiny.
And
I don't
those
know
backgrounds,
why I'm off with the measurements right now. Let me get you exact measurements, and I want to like historically say it correctly.
those backgrounds too, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but he kind of washed those in with terps. So like that's a one-shot kind of deal. Like you either got it or you didn't. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the terps. Yeah, it's just that's exactly like you say. That to me, that has not been noodled. It's just gone straight in there. But look at this mastery of design as well. Look at that beautiful little turn there going around, that beautiful moment heading down to Tarzan, I guess this is. But it may not be Tarzan. Do you know, for Sarah, if this is Tarzan? It's got to be, surely.
It is. That was an Edgar Rice Burroughs cover.
Yeah. He was just so great at carving a figure out. Look at that. That could be a landscape right there. It could be a rocky landscape. And I was talking to Darren Bader. Darren Bader's he owns one of the only people I know that owns a Frank Frazetta. He's got a preliminary of the Man with the Ball and Chain. And we both discussed how beautiful this is. Just for a carving out. And look at the way he's got all of this beautiful tan in here, and then just bravely put in this white flesh here. Amazing. Look at that. This all represents anatomy, but it looks like he's made of rock. It's so what we were talking about, Chuck, remember? About killing midtones, because midtones are quite almost where you go to when you're frightened. You go to midtones to try and bamboozle the audience, and they have to go, I'm not quite sure if the anatomy's right there or not, because the midtones are so muddy. Whereas Frank went, well, here's your great trochanter, here's your vastus lateralis. He's got it all in there, Look at these knees. Look at the tibial nose right in there. All of that stuff is just in granite. There's nothing hidden midtones at all. Just absolutely gorgeous. Oh yeah, I was going to go back to the first thought, which was, did Frank, when he made this tiger up, was he thinking of human anatomy? Let's have a look at it. Yeah,
I was going to ask you that, Patrick, because some of his animals, he did this with a lion. It was an Edgar Rice Burroughs ink piece, and the lion really looked like it was a human lion sort of creature, and I always felt the same for that. Like it's that pelvic region and stomach specifically. But real quick, so the panther, it was actually 8x10, so it's still pretty small. I was close.
What was it,
but
sir?
not that close. 8x10.
8x10. That's tiny. That's
small.
8x10.
It's not 4x6 small, but it's still small.
Well, 8x10 is just photocopy paper, so that's tiny.
Yeah,
that's really small. I was going to grab a piece there. Yeah, absolutely. So there's your iliac crest, and we were talking about the sartorius earlier there with Rachel. So Rachel and Melanie and Chuck and Corey were my previous students, but they're the alamata, the jewel in the crown, the top dogs, you can add to that, whatever it is, the head honchos, So have a look at their work. It's really beautiful. And so there's the adductors in there.
So like, what's it like to make that more of like a cat rather than like, what would he do to make that more like a cat pelvis, I guess?
Well,
Or like, what is it that makes it look like a human right there?
well, what's making it look like a human to me is basically, you know how a dog's like this. Okay, so there's a dog and it's got its little legs like this. You can tell I can't draw dogs. But the distance between here and there is totally different from a human person. So if your little dog jumps up and he's giving you the licks and stuff, then his torso looks like that. So there's his little, like I say, I don't know, is that a dog or an alien? So when the little dog comes up to you like that and gives you the licks, it's very short from here to there, whereas a human being has this Roman gladiator feel. You know, there's the clavicles, and then you put a chest on here, and down to the abdominals and the obliques and stuff. So you've got basically, that's what a human looks like. But from the side, we're actually quite narrow compared to a dog. So a dog's got all its width on the outside, and we've got all our width on the inside. And so that's what makes me feel that looks like human, because it's very wide looking from underneath. That's what looks human to me. You know, if that was a woman, I could put breasts in here. You know, like this. And then there's the navel coming through. Because it reminds me of a lot of life drawing classes that I've done of the female figure coming around like this. And then this becomes like a male figure. It's got the deltoids there, and then it's got the clavicles, got the triceps in here. And then it looks very much like a person down here.
This is like the premise of a really horrifying, scary movie. This like cat with this man and woman.
Yeah.
Like but that's what makes me appreciate my grandfather's art that much more. Because I'm like, it's so weird and just unique to Frank Frazetta.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I'm glad we're diving into this. This is fun, Patrick.
Yeah, it is great. I mean, it's like the island of Dr. Moreau, isn't it? But yeah, I can see where he's divided the extensors, which are the muscles at the top that make you do this, from the flexors at the bottom that make your muscles do this. So these are all flexors in here. And then you've got that bridge of the ulna. So for me, that looks very much like human anatomy. It really looks exactly like it. And then there's your latissimus, your big muscle, the most muscles that bodybuilders do that, and then they get a big cape shape, these muscles here, those muscles seen from the front. So I feel that's very much like that, but I love it all the more for it, because that really feels like, it's almost vulnerable. You can almost imagine a person now lying here like this. It's quite weird, isn't it? Actually, looking at it, I feel a bit weird.
Oh, now I'll never not see that.
It's into your brain.
When they go through those Renaissance paintings and they take a layer off and they find another painting under it. Maybe there was a woman under there originally. Yeah. Are there any prelims for this one?
That's actually There is a prelim, but I believe it has the cat. But let's double check that. That's interesting.
Just a conspiracy theory I'm throwing out there that it was originally Catwoman in here. Yeah.
How long do you think he spent on this one?
Are you asking Sarah or me?
Whoever would know.
Well,
yeah,
go ahead, Sarah. I'd be interested to hear what you think, Sarah.
I think initially, he did go back and rework it. So it's hard to say exactly how much time, like how many hours he put into it. But it was probably realistically like a week of work for this painting. He was really, really quick by this time. So it could have been just a few days. When he got it back from Warren Publishing, he did change the face. And I believe, let me see if he changed the cat at all. And when I say he changed the face, like he changed the face so many times. So that's like another additional like months of work just because he was not happy with how it looked at all. So no, in the rough work, there is a big cat. So no, it was never, the position is entirely different. The whole mood. Can you, Patrick, you might be able to pull it up. It's just a Frazetta Egyptian Queen rough work. If you type that into Google.
Sure. Let's have a look.
You can see how much that changed from the prelim to the final. And the cat had no humanistic body parts in the rough work. So it's another interesting layer. There it is.
Yeah, that's interesting to bring that up, actually, Sarah.
It's still a fat cat.
Look at, yeah, that actually looks like, if I'm not mistaken, a paste-in. It is. It's a paste-in. Look, see?
What do you mean by that?
It
Like
means that Frank had done that on a separate piece. Maybe he had another go at this. I don't know. But he's done this cat on a separate piece and liked it enough to cut it out with scissors and then lay it on top of another rough. That's what I'm seeing.
So
right
interesting. I did not know. Wow.
Yeah, we used to do it all the time in advertising. Paste-ins were very common. And they do it a lot in comic books. If they bring a new artist in, like Jack Kirby, for instance, they brought in for Superman at DC Comics. And they did the worst thing you could possibly do, is they brought this brilliant artist, Jack Kirby, the best in comic books, had him draw Superman. And it looked fabulous when he did it. It was all Jack Kirby style. And then they went, that's not what Superman looks like to our audience, because Kurt Swan and all these other guys had drawn Superman in a different style. And so they had another artist come in and they would draw Superman's face on every single Jack Kirby panel, the way the audience were used to seeing it. And it was horrific. It looked like Frankenstein had come in and started drawing. And they would just cut that one piece out and they would paste it on top of all of Jack Kirby's work. And that was it was called a paste-in. And that's a paste-in there. And
we need to go through all of the art and find paste-ins. That's fascinating to me. I love that. I love that your eye picked that up. I would have never seen that.
Yeah. And it made the absolute perfect choice. And it's great. I love the preliminaries because it shows you the mind at work. And it shows that Frank, at one stage, this is called, when we have everything straight ahead like this, you know, these panels, and then the steps would come down. This is called stage composition. And the reason it's called that is because it's the same as how you would see it if you were in an audience and you were watching a stage play and you would look up, and because you're sitting on a flat surface and then the plinth of the stage is a flat surface, and then everything beyond that, beds or stairs, are all on the same line. So anything that's sitting on the surface will automatically keep going up like that, like stairs. See? And then there's only one thing to do with stairs then, is that. But here Frank has toyed with the idea of doing perspective. So you're watching it off stage, you're watching it from the wings. And I think he made the correct choice. That would never be as powerful as the stage composition that he ended up with. Because look what it does. It takes this cat and makes our eye go out of the picture. Like that. And now we're not looking up here, because these diagonals are so powerful that there's nothing else you can do but join that train out of the picture. Like that. And I learned that from, you know, gallery work, when people were saying, you definitely don't want to put anything on this side of the picture, because automatically the eye goes to the next picture, and that might be your competition right next to you. Don't look here, look to this next picture and buy that instead. And so you got to think of a lot of things if you're working in galleries, and that's one of them. So what we want to do is keep coming back in here to the Egyptian queen. And so the light is so powerful here that it works. We keep going in here. But this was definitely, we don't want that at all. And it just shows that Frank was human. He's throwing these ideas around. And I wanted to ask you how long you thought he took, because I know that there was Frank the myth and there was Frank the legend, and he'll always be that to me.
Yeah.
But it was overdone to the point where he was superhuman. And then I always thought when Superman wasn't so appealing to me, because he could turn back time and stuff. You know, there was no jeopardy for him. Whereas Spider-Man was always getting beaten up and dropped in the trash, and he had to fight another day with a new strategy. So I was really invested in him. And thinking of Frank as a god, it makes you almost just drop out of the race and just go, well, what's the point? But to see his process, made him even.
Well, and I think that happened really. I mean, he had a lot of confidence. When I read his interviews, like from Esquire back in the 70s, he had a lot of confidence in himself, but he was more realistic with how he worked. He did still say occasionally that he mostly worked from his head, even though, of course, we've seen a lot of different references and obviously know he pulled from films and whatnot. But it really started to heighten when he was around Dave Winowitz, and Dave Winowitz had him writing that like artist manifesto, the statement that he never used a reference. And that's when it started building. I think like because of his health issues, because he had a little bit of like early onset dementia, he started kind of believing that to be the truth. And he said it with conviction. I mean, it's hard to remember, last week, let alone decades before. And if someone's feeding you that information and your brain is not working the way it should be, then yeah, you're going to believe that. And that's how it just kind of snowballed and kept growing. And that's been one of the things that I've wanted to do with Rosetta Girls, is like just to inspire people with the truth, because the truth is pretty damn amazing. And you don't need to have this mythical creature approach. It doesn't hold up, especially with the internet debunking everything.
Yeah. Well, I think he's more amazing because he was human. Like they brought a kid out here once, and he had a particular, I won't call it an ailment, but he had a focus so intense that he could draw something in minutia, having just looked at it once. And they flew him across Brisbane City. And he went back to the Brisbane Art Museum. So it was all documented. It was all true. And he drew with pen the entire landscape. I mean, you'd be lucky to remember 3 of the buildings in a row. And he drew the entire landscape in the Brisbane Art Museum here. He was called the boy, if you couldn't make it any simpler, he was called the boy who could draw buildings. And there was something in his mind, and they corrected it. Whatever was going on in his mind, they corrected it, and he could no longer do that. So all he could do was autofocus. Wow. And it was an ailment to him, because he just couldn't live in this world with that mind constantly seeing minutiae that just passed. Imagine the horror of all that information constantly in your head, whereas you want to have a conversation with someone and you're just looking at all that stuff you've just seen, and continue to do that would be a nightmare. And so they fixed him up, and he can no longer draw buildings. And his agent dropped him, says, "You're no use to me anymore." So there was a sad end to it all. But it was more impressive to me if after that he could do that. He could go and learn how to do that and then do it. And so that Frank was learning how to be brilliant and then became brilliant is more impressive to me than he was just brilliant with no input. It just happened.
Absolutely.
I'm just born brilliant. So to see the process here makes it more impressive to me that you could really do these incredible, look at that, this incredible stuff from a human being. Amazing. And when I look, this is one of my favorites, by the way, this one. And I often meet artists and go, this doesn't get enough love from certain pieces. I was in the museum talking to an artist, and there was a painting there, and it was one of the Edgar Rice Burroughs where they go under the earth at the earth's core or something. It might even be that. And there's a girl, and she's turning around. There's this lizard beast coming out of the water, out of the mist. And we both talked about how that didn't get enough love. And when you see it in real life, it is just tremendous. I wonder, Sarah, do you have that one? Is that in your museum?
That one is, oh gosh, who bought that one? That one's in a private collection, but I don't even know if I should disclose the name. But no, that's not in ours. That one, oh my God, that one, the background, like you said, it's what, I can't think of, the Dark Crystal. There's a lot of influence, and you can see that Dark Crystal took Jim Hansen. Yeah, it's incredible. Now this one, I don't know. I like it. I really love the background. I love those girls. But I just don't know how to feel about that figure in the foreground. And I don't, it makes me feel weird. I don't know why.
I wonder.
And I'm sorry, Grandpa. He'd be so mad. Anytime I criticize something, he's like, you do something better. I'm like, I'm not saying I could do anything better. I'm just telling you how it makes me feel. Like,
are you imagining a conversation, or did you have a conversation like that?
Oh, I've had a conversation. I just asked him why he chose to not show the hands and feet all the time and had like severed limbs. And he would just look at me in disbelief that I even said something. And he goes, he showed me, he pulled up Reassembled Man and he goes, I can draw a hand. And I go, yeah, I know you can. I said, I'm just wondering why you don't. So it bothered him.
Sarah, tell me how old you were when you had that conversation.
20.
I love how tough he is. Well, you do better.
Yeah. Oh, my grandpa, this is a little insight of his personality. I've always had like pretty horrible skin. So, it was like my 20s just full of acne. Now I have melasma and everything else. But I remember I went up, I saw him for the first time in a while. And I'm like, Grandpa, it's so good to see you. He's like, you look so good, but what's all that all over your face? Get rid of it. I'm like, I can't get rid of what? I was like, he's a little bit too much of a artistic genius when he notices like flaws in real life. And you're like, excuse me, I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm not perfect like your girls in your painting.
I'm sorry for being me.
Sorry for being a human with flaws.
Yeah. Oh.
No, we don't live in the Frazetta verse.
Wow, that's tough.
That was Grandpa. No, it was funny. It was all we'd go back and forth at each other. He could handle it. He had a good sense of humor.
Yeah, well, it's that generation, When I go and see my dad and see how gruff he is, I mean, I love him and everything, but that kind of gruffness, if he was ever to go and teach, the children would all be crying. They'd all be running out in tears.
Oh, yeah.
And then he'd be criticizing them for that. What are they crying for? But why you feel weird about this, I think it might possibly be in here. Because we're looking at an androgynous kind of glue, as far as I can see. But all of such a bold choice to have the main figure, completely facing away from the audience. And I wish there was more of it. And also anyone that's ever painted a head from the back would know that it becomes a horrible junction. We wish you hadn't even thought of the idea, and then put the head in profile or something. But the fact that he went into abstract here to get this hair was one of the things that just fascinated me, that this is total abstraction. There's no hair that looks like this, but we still read it as hair. And the golden glow and the lost edges, there's so much to admire in this piece. And of course, the anatomy and the abstraction of the anatomy as well. I mean, this is just fabulous.
Yeah, this is like one of my favorite paintings of a back right here, because the way he does the shoulders. I think it's the Terrace Miner that's like poking out, like there, right there.
Yeah,
which you never see that, and I don't know, like I've drawn this one a couple times because I like how that looks. It became like a thing that I like because of this painting.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. You're absolutely right, and good call on there. Didn't I tell you that these students were the Alamada? Did you see that?
Yeah, I love it. I'm learning a lot. I think it's the glute. I mean, now that back is great, but like when you're looking at the flexion on the left glute muscle,
this one,
shouldn't it be a little bit smaller from that angle or no?
Look, Sarah, Frank liked big butts, and he cannot lie.
Oh, and he could not lie. He loved big butts, and he could not lie. And that's what I love with when people talk about, like I had a couple questions at the Tashin event we just went to, and they were like, well, what does the younger generation think about your grandfather's work? And it's overly sexualized with women. And I said, again, this question is for people who have this question. And if people think this, then they do not know the body of his work. Because if you actually know Frazetta's work, you know that there were no clothing. There was less clothing on males than there was the females. Actually, they just Frazetta anything in the Frazetta verse didn't wear pants, and it was just because he had such an appreciation for anatomy with women, men, animals, as we saw tonight. Like it wasn't about like sexualizing just women. So I think he just found a beauty in everything. So the young generation really appreciates that because it is kind of androgynous in general. And there's not really a set tone on the body of like just being, a pinup. It's not all pinup girls. So Yeah, but this, yeah. So keep telling me about the gluteus, the big,
well, I think what we have,
the big left cheek.
well, what it is this sacrum right here. That is very rounded. And so on the female figure, we tend to get that really pronounced. And on the male figure, not so much. So on the male figure, we tend to get a push up like this more. So I've reduced the gluteus to what is generally a male gluteus. You could even go smaller than that and go here. So you can see how much he's taken that. That's probably too far. But he's taken it all the way down to here, like that. And that is definitely feminine to me. That's a female gluteus. And he's done the same over here. And I've seen that before in his figures. So if I just bring this down to the bottom of the screen there, that's more of a male gluteus there. And then if I take all that away, you can see just how gigantic these, especially this one, like you said, that's very much a feminine gluteus right there. It's huge. A strange thing about the male and female gluteus is the male gluteus is usually rounder and the female figure is more square. But when we get up to this point, then the male figure starts to become more square up on this edge here. But it's this big sacrum that I think is really pushing the boat on at that point. Very unusual to see on a man. I mean, he hasn't put it really in, but I can feel it because he's left out all the detail here to tell me that that's where it fits into. Because these little sacrospinalis pipes coming down here on each side of the spine, they stop on the sacrum, and you can see them stop right here. And that's where we get usually the little dimples like that, sacrum dimples. So he hasn't put those in. But yeah, see that anconius right there? A muscle, I didn't even hear of it until I was well into my art career. Anconius. Is it spelled like that? I think, maybe, I don't know. But anconius, who knows about the anconius? And yet he's pushed it right in there and overdid it to the point where it's just this beautiful island of hard flatness where all these extensors are popping back out from the same spot. So everything's going up to this spot up here, to that epicondyle. But he knew it all so well. So there's the big player, the brachioradialis and the carpi longus. And then this little moment here, always on the thumb. So that's the pollicis. So look how much Frank knew about anatomy, that he could make all these little turns, boom, 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 all the way down there, so confidently in paint, and never lose it, never lose that simplicity. Almost impossible to do when you're painting. And that's what makes me believe he did paint quite quickly, because the longer you take over the painting, the more errors you start to make in the blending. And the more you blend, the more you lose focus. And then eventually the anatomy falls apart. So you might see these hyperreal paintings and they look impressive to start with. And then you start to feel something's not quite right in the midst of it all. And then if you were to take, like I'm doing here, an artist that knows a bit of anatomy, to draw over the top, you'll soon see that all these super real paintings aren't really that great, because the anatomy is just not working at all. Whereas Frank here, we can see that he's totally aware of all of that design, just totally aware of all the anatomy. And so for me, I think that Frank might have been a bit like the boy that drew buildings, but that is a lot of information. See, the thing with the boy that drew buildings is he was watching something pass his eye. Whereas Frank has to turn the body over and over for different paintings, and that's totally different. So we have to learn that. The boy that would draw buildings would have to go all the way around the body like this to draw it. So he didn't do that. He just went across like this. So for me, Frank must have known his anatomy so well that he could do that from any angle. And I believe that Frank must have been learning his anatomy all the time, must have always been studying anatomy.
Patrick, I want to go grab something real quick, a really early little work that I can show right here.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I'll be right back. I'm just gonna turn this 1 second.
Thanks, Sarah. Looking forward to that. So, any of you guys have any questions? Like, we're not live anymore, so if any of you...
I guess I have a question. The anconius, what does it do? Like,
the anconius,
as far as function.
What does it do? That's a good question, actually. For me, it's an anchor, as far as I can see, because it doesn't, you know how the flexors, all these extensors, sorry. So all these muscles here are doing this. And all these muscles here on that blade side here are doing this with the thumb. So they're the big player. That's why there's a whole bunch of them here. That's the flat part of your arm is totally almost dedicated to just working the thumb. So if I touch here, these are the muscles that don't really bulge. So as I move that thumb, there's just a flat surface here that's only slightly moving. Whereas if I do this, I can feel a bicep in a second, you know? But that's a dumb muscle. That's only doing this. This is sophisticated muscles doing that. And they don't have such a big thing because they're not doing any heavy lifting. As far as the anconeus is concerned, I can't flex that at all. I can do this and feel all the flexors. I'm actually doing that and feeling them now moving. For the anconeus, I'm going to put my finger on it now. And if I do this with my fingers, absolutely no movement in the anconeus at all. Nothing at all. So I'm likely to say the anconeus is an anchor. It's just to keep everything solid. Because like you've got the muscles on the side of your leg keeping everything solid. The tensor muscles here coming down like this to attach around the other side. And they're basically just a flat band, the iliotibial band. And that's just to keep all the muscles from doing that. You know, when you're running, all your fastest lateralis flying out and stuff, you still see it on runners. You see their muscles fly from side to side. But without that iliotibial band, it'd be going vroom, vroom, vroom. I mean, if you flex your bicep, my cousin Tommy, poor Tommy, I've said this 100 times. When he flexed his bicep, he was so weak that the minute he stopped flexing, the bicep would fall on its side like that, just fall over. And that's obvious because the bicep doesn't attach to the bone at all. It only attaches to the lower end by a tendon and up to the top by a tendon. So it's just a punching bag. Yeah. And so it will fall over. So it has to be flexed to be seen. But the anconeus, as far as I can see, but thanks for the question, Rachel, because I'm like Frank, I'm always looking at anatomy and saying, you know, I know where it is, but I've never asked that question. What is the anconeus for? I think it must be
muscle.
What do you think, Chuck?
Yeah, I was going to say the Dorito. That's how I remember that one.
Yeah. It's the Dorito, yeah. So it's like
it's delicious. It's delicious.
The mnemonic.
Delicious muscle. They give you high blood pressure. Hold on. It's the future. Google. Hey, Google. What does the anconeus muscle do?
Oh, no.
On the website physio-pedia.com, they say, functionally, the anconeus fulfills the same tasks at the elbow as the triceps muscle. Its contraction leads to the extension of the forearm at the elbow. Furthermore, it keeps the tension of the dorsal joint capsule, thus preventing damages during hyperextension.
There you go. It's an anchor muscle.
So it moves with the tricep is what I got out of it.
Well, what it is, when you got the common tendon of the tricep, and it's really not doing much, but it's keeping it all anchored. It's stopping all that happening with all the triceps at the top. So it's basically where the flexors are, it's stopping them. It's exactly like Patrick said.
Yeah.
Unrelated, but does Google talk in Australian in Australia?
You know what? I forget whether it is. Did that sound Australian to you?
Yeah.
Because when I was going around with those Canadian collectors, I had my phone to help them. They were doing old school. They were pulling the map out, you know, like this. So we were in high danger all the time trying to get to Canada from Pennsylvania. And I said, let's just use Google. And they posted later, this lovely Australian woman took us all the way to Canada. And I didn't realize that she had an Australian accent. I could no longer hear it. To me, she just
Good day. The anconeus connects the
bloody straight, the anconeus, mate. Yeah, see, I don't hear it like that. She just sounded posh to me. So posh sounded universal to me. Sarah, did you find it?
I did.
Okay.
So this is one of his flip books. He was around either between the ages of 12 and 14 when he did this. This was a book called Gray Dawn. So I just wanted to show you, I mean, he had some training at this point, but not much. Can you see that? See that? Yeah, so it's just interesting to see. So this is one panel. And then let's see.
I've never seen this before.
Not many have. This has not been published or anything. So it will be. But it's really interesting to just see, because you were bringing up Building Boy, and my grandpa definitely had some sort of, again, like a photographic memory, to be able to understand those peak action like pose. I mean, everything, like just the way this guy's head is. Look at, can you see that, or is there glare?
Yeah, I can see it.
It's just like how it's like sitting there like lifeless. Like he just understood inherently that like human movement and anatomy. And yes, he of course had a lot of help along the way, but this doesn't, I mean, this is for a 12-year-old, 14-year-old. I mean, this is very advanced.
It's really highly advanced, yeah. Because
Doesn't
wasn't
show
he,
you that.
he was working professionally at 16, wasn't he, Sarah, in the comic books?
He started working at 14 technically, and then he was published when he was 15.
Wow.
But I mean, that was really Bernard Bailey. At Bernard Bailey's, he was with John Gunta, and it was just basically one guy, John Gunta, who was like, "Oh, this kid's really good." Gave him the shot with the snowman, but he was still mostly doing the dirty work of just erasing pencil lines and not really like working. But that's how he got noticed for the snowman, was he was drawing these little flip books. And John Gunta was like, what are you doing? You know, but in between his pencil erasing, he's like, what are you drawing there, kid? And he was like, wow, you're really good. Come here. Yeah. Let's publish something.
Sarah,
make some money on you.
Yeah. Sarah, can you show, is that book an original or is that a repo?
This is the original. I'm just like, I know, and I have my greasy hands on it. I'm like, oh, I need to get it photographed, preserved, and then we'll do something with it. But yeah, these are the oldest original works by my grandfather. So they're really something I cherish. My uncle Bill gave me one of those for a certain, like, just trading, bartering. So yeah, I was really happy with this because it's just such an important part of his history, with his legacy.
Yeah,
I love seeing the starting points to things.
Me too.
I have to.
Would you mind holding it up against her? I'd love to see it. The front part of it. So
see how small? I told you guys, it's so tight. Like, it's insane.
And did he buy? Because I remember when I was a kid, you could buy things that you don't buy anymore. Did he buy a flip book, or did he make a flip book? Did he buy that?
So he had like 12 of these, and they all were the same. So I think he did buy them. Man, they made things so much better back then. This is from the 40s, and it's still holding on. It's incredible. Look at this panel. I mean, and he was making these little stories. This character was actually pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Great on. It's like World War II. Kill the Nazis. That's really what most of his stories were about, or they were about like kind of like based on like Edgar Rice Burroughs. He had another one called The Cave Girl. So they weren't like highly innovative with storytelling, world building, but in terms of the illustrations, like they were great. His dialogue is interesting in it. Yeah. When I publish it, it's just gonna be fun. I'll give you a sneak peek look before it, Patrick. Yeah. I'll send you all of the panels.
Oh, will you? There's so much in those.
Remind me.
In those hesitant phrases there. It was interesting. The dialogue.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's of the time.
There's different times, it was different times. Someone says you just got to scratch the surface of any 80-year-old and you'd be horrified, But it's just
we'll all be horrified of our 80-year-old selves. I mean, I'm already starting to become like, I was very judgmental when I was 20 of my grandfather's views, and I said, what's wrong with you? Like, evolve, and then it's like, well, it's a lot of work to adapt constantly and know what's appropriate and what you should say. I mean, because we all are just banks of information from what we've already learned, and it's like a lot of it's not. We're not trying to be intentionally like hateful, or it's just ignorance, and we don't know. So I'm starting to feel that now, and I'm like, oh man, karma at its finest. So be careful when you're judging people. Yeah. Oh, they don't know what they're doing, because you too will be one of those people one day.
Yeah. It's and for some reason it affects uncles more than fathers. For some reason, uncles are the worst. I don't know what it is about that. Okay,
I have a weird uncle.
Oh, everyone has. Now, Sarah, I know I always keep you up, so you feel free to jump out at any time. But I'm going to carry on. I think these podcasts are usually 2 to 3 hours, but you can.
I'm good till 9 p.m. 9's great.
Oh, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
So you've got 8:30 at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's call it that. And I'll go through some more of Frank's work. And you guys feel free to jump in with the questions. Like I say, the live audience isn't with us, and I feel bad about that. But there's nothing we could do. We did our best. We had Corey in the house, and if Corey, it's when we got Corey and it doesn't work, then it's not our fault. It's something else. Isn't that right, Corey?
Yeah. I'll tell you. Yeah, it's tough. Oh.
We did everything. We did everything we
Yeah.
could to make it work. So I'm going to have to look into, maybe it's an upgrade or something on Zoom for me to do.
Yeah, and we can try OBS next time. So
OBS, I've already been in there, Corey. That was even more horrific. But yeah, we'll try it.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. So we may be able to like do a roundabout way to do a YouTube live stream.
Oh, well, that'd be great. And it's just for Sarah. I feel awful for Sarah, My
No, I'm chill. I'm good. This is great. Don't feel bad.
My students are all used to me being. I used learn helplessness all the time in class. I just don't even try. I just go, I don't know how this works, And
it's part of the charm. It's part of the charm. I love it.
They see my despair and they come up and they go, and they come up and they fix it. But I've got to start helping myself at some point. But look at this beautiful stuff here. Like I say, when you get the book, that wonderful Tatchin book, and I'm in love with Tatchin books, by the way. They just love books, and it shows.
I have a question about those inks.
Yeah.
Are those, when he did those, was he laying in pencil first? Can you see pencil erasures on those, or did he just go right in with I assume that's a brush, but I'm not sure how.
So is this for me or for Sarah?
For Sarah,
I'm not sure. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Patrick, would you know, looking at it?
I would say definitely penciled it first. He would have to. I mean, I know he was a genius and everything, but to go in, to commit to inks for a finished project to be delivered and not pencil it first would be a madness.
Yeah, he did the roughs in pencil. I know that. Like for those Canaveral plates and ink, he always had rough works in pencil. So yeah, I imagine so.
Well, I don't know of any artist that ever inked anything without pencil first, ever. But what I would think,
his doodles didn't have pencil, but that was because they were little doodles with ink.
Yeah, it's a totally different story.
The ones with the lines that just keep going, where there was there's no start stop point on the lines. It's just like fluid. Those are the ones that obviously he didn't have a pencil. Like he did this. I don't think it's named, but it's a Conan Frost Giant ink, and it was done in just like a fluid inking, like just one single pen to paper line, and it's insane. Like it's amazing, but it's different. It's different than the full like finished ink brush Canaveral plates.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt in the, like my favorite ink of his, the Tarzan and the Castaways, I think it is, where he's holding that woman princess going through the tree. Is that what that's called? The Castaways?
Yep.
There's no doubt that, there had to be pencil work in there, but the brush work after the fact was definitely that is on the fly. There's no doubt about that. But if we look at the likes of John Buscema here, who just drew and drew all the time, I'd love to have met Frank and asked him if he had to be aware of John Buscema, of course, what he thought of John Buscema. And if we look at John Buscema's work, I assume that Frank would have worked like this. I hope this shows properly, but if you look in here at John Buscema's work, it's just the bare bones. And then he goes to town with the inks because he's so confident that he can draw with the inks, but have the preliminary in there first. Most artists would draw exactly the inks, the pencil as inks, and then the inks would just go straight on top. But I would assume that Frank would be more like John Buscema. Look at the fluidity in here. And you can see the inks coming alive on top. For things like hands, I think you'd have to really make sure they're detailed to begin with. But for all the other stuff, look how fluid this is here. And yet he's starting to put in this detail. That's how I would imagine Frank did it. This is just a surmise how I think he would have been. Because I think he was, not only of the caliber of John Buscema, but beyond it. And Jean Buscema was the greatest in comic books. There was nobody could draw. They called him the Michelangelo of comics. And I've never heard of any moment of Frank or John talking about each other, but they had they've known each other, because they were look at that, they were the best of their times. That is amazing there in John Buscema. But yeah, Frank was the king. There's no doubt about it. Nobody ever did inks, and I can't imagine ever will do inks of that caliber again, because we're in a different world now. It could be possible, you know. If they say Frank, you know, he was fast, but he was also, he had the patience to be fast. You have to be able to draw and draw and draw to be fast. And so he had all that patience, put the mileage in to be able to do that. Whether that's going to continue with, you know, you get Instagram and you bring it down to, people will get frustrated if something is more than 2 minutes long on Instagram. They'll go, I can't be bothered. And so they're putting things in like, wait for it. Well, it's different because there's not much worth waiting for. But at the same time, that's the attention span now that's terrifying me, that people only have a short attention span. So I'm really loving the meditative idea of going in and spending as much time looking at Frank's work than he probably spent on drawing it. I mean, if I zoom in on this, I could just look at that and learn so much and just love it. I mean, look at it. Look at the weight. And I think that's what's missing to it. You can't draw feet, my ass. Look at that foot.
It's great.
Yeah. So
he did say he just didn't really like to draw them. And he said his answer was that it took away. Sometimes if you put the limbs in, like he'd have missing limbs, missing feet, missing hands. He said, and it was because, like you said, the missing line on the loincloth, it was too distracting. So it needed to be missing.
It's true. I mean, first of all, who wants to look at feet? But also,
some people really do, Patrick.
Nasty feet. Oh yeah, I've heard about them. Yeah, nasty feet. I know a particular artist. But yeah, if you go to the feet, there's so much detail in there, and the eye naturally goes to contrast and detail. And so it's going to go to your feet. And that's not where we don't want them to look at the feet. You know, all the action's up here, up in that moment where the conflict happens. So it would have to be a particular feet moment for the feet to be in there. If someone's fighting you with their feet, what kind of crazy nuts would that be? But it would have to be something like that. So a foot fighter, for that to be important. So let's have a look in here. You see, he's fading out the feet here because the contrast is up here. So the foot's available if you want to look at it, but you would want to not linger there. And so the more contrast you put in a certain place, the more your eye's going to linger there. And so that's how you compose. And if you put detail everywhere, you're not composing. And I think that's what Frank, you know, obviously in the master he has meant, that feet are distracting because there's so much detail in them. And hands we can detail because there's so much action usually happening around that moment, like right there, this point here. But everything I see by him makes me just feel, you know, I ask all those questions. Why this? I'm asking myself right now, why this spear? And I'm trying to get my head around why he put that spear in. I'm trying to think about that right now because it's cutting the panel in two. So that's a little mystery for me to explore. I've got to ask myself why he did that. Sometimes you'll get a moment in composition like this one. Let's see if I can find it again, where you had all the beasts. It was a Hammer horror thing. I think I brought it in. There's the Castaways there. Yeah, Tarzan and the Castaways. Mm-hmm. I think hurt terribly by this colorization. Just painful. I don't know what they were thinking.
It is painful.
That is awful. Compared to this, can we open it in Photoshop? Oh, it's so gorgeous. And the over-saturate the blacks again, like we were talking about earlier, as if you've got to appeal to the widest audience rather than the audience that wants to see this. And I think if you're appealing to the widest audience, I think it's a bad play because they're most likely to move on to a different thing. Whereas you play to the audience, let the audience find you. So Frank was drawing for himself, painting for himself. And bombastic as he was at times, here the subtlety of the inks and the washes. This was all for himself. And anyone else that wanted to appreciate this, the artist in me appreciates the tactile nature and the subtlety of the inks and thin line and lost line. Everything that's in here is perfect and should never be touched again. And yet I've seen it blown out. For some reason, people want to get pure whites for some crazy reason and pure blacks. I don't know. I don't understand it. This is gorgeous. And I don't think I ever saw this in real life. I can't remember. I don't know why I don't think I've seen this.
I don't think I have either. I think,
I wonder if it was sold. Was it in the museum?
yeah, it was not, but I know he really liked that. And that kind of goes against what I said earlier, saying he didn't sell the ones that he really loved. Maybe that was in Dave Winowitz's collection. I think that's where it was. I think he might have sold it to Dave.
Oh, really?
Probably reluctantly, but what Dave was doing was he was trading my grandfather cameras, and my grandpa was so into photography that he'd give up his favorite piece of art for a new camera. That's why my grandma had to step in and say no one's coming over anymore.
Jeez, that is horrific.
For good reason.
That is horrific. But I'd love to see it. I would love to see that. Now we were
I don't know who bought it. It was at auction. He sold this whole collection in 2015.
I saw
so I'm
that.
not sure.
On her.
Yeah, so I'm not sure where that one went. We need to find it. I need to see that one. I'll tell you, Patrick, if I find it.
Yeah, would you? That'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the collectors were asking me. They love the inside stuff because they're collectors. You know, they love to know what's happening in the collector world. But
I want to connect with those collectors. I want to start talking to more collectors and putting together exhibits with Rosetta art, like we talked about before we were recording.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, if you go back to that Frank Frazetta piece there, we were just talking about this earlier about the colors being off on this one because there was a lot of purples and greens in this. But it's a good place to say, here's the reason why that Frazetta gluteus on the male looks so feminine. It's that giant sacrum. So I think Frank loves sacrums. That's what I'm saying here. I think he loved them, and I love them too. But if we do this and do that, you'll see just how beautiful the female figure is. And the fact that the hips are coming right off. This is me also, once again, admiring Frank's admiration of anatomy. Just beautiful. We go across here, just for any artist watching, just below the sacrum. So the sacrum's a great landmark. You go just below the sacrum there, then you get the great trochanter top right there. And that's the moment where the hips usually are the widest. And then you can continue that if you like for Sophia Loren all the way down to there, or start coming in at that point. So just knowing where that is gives you a great landmark. And also, if you can't see the other side, if you're not aware of how does the three-dimensional aspect work, which is going back to Frank knowing everything from every angle, I'll bet Frank knew that on the other side here, that the pubic area was starting just below that sacrum, like that on the other side. So on the other side there, if you look in figure drawing classes and models on stage, you'll see the gluteus from the other side just poking through like that. So the crotch end of ton on the other side is higher than the gluteus end of ton here, like that. And that's where we sit, like this. So Frank knew all of that stuff. You know, he knew it so well that he just drew gluteus masterly, just fantastic. I'll take that out because it's such a weird thing. But it is interesting to see in that upside down butterfly shape to get the gluteus, that little mnemonic right there. Just fantastic. How he simplified things and made them look real and then just riffed off of them to do anything you wanted. Just an absolute master of mnemonics. So a mnemonic's a strange memory clue, and that's what that upside down butterfly is there. So the wings of a butterfly, they're bigger on top and they're smaller on the bottom. So that's why that's that mnemonic. But look at that small little waist. Just sensational, and it's beautiful. Beautiful. He did small rib cages. I think we talked about that before. He did small rib cages. And, you know, that's part of style. Style is what you prefer and how you push it. I always loved this. he didn't even put anything in there at all. It's just pure white. And I know that a lot of this is artifacts from being reproduced, but just the darkness above and below that white was all he needed. Look at that little twirl right there before the other three. So he never made two things the same. He was very aware not to just do this like that. Beautiful. I can hear the jingle jangle. Look at that one off just right there. I can hear the jingle jangle of all of that. Beautiful hand. And he really knew about that carpal ramp. And the Renaissance artists called that the egg. I'm not going to write Renaissance because I can't spell it. So I'll just put R, the R egg right there. And then look at how he understood overlaps, that this is in front of that. Just gorgeous. Pushing that little maverick out. I love the maverick of the little finger, the pinky. And for any artist watching, you know, I would say, take that little finger and remember that it's different from the others. It has its own, see, even if I just put my hand up there, you can see the little finger just push right on. It has its own tendon. The other three are coming down to these extensors. So if I do that, I'm feeling them. But this little guy here, he's got his own little tendon all the way up the little brevis thing. You can actually see he's different from the others. So he shares a carpal down here with the ring finger. So he doesn't get his own carpal, which is basically all of the wrist in here. He doesn't get one. And I always felt sorry for him for that reason. Little poverty finger comes out from an angle like that. So they have to, these two metacarpals here, these two big bones, are resting on one carpal in there, one little wrist bone. So I always think of that. And then with the index finger, he always made more of the index finger too. So these two for me are the mavericks, M and M. And the ones in the middle can do as they please, once you've got those two guys in place. So he was really beautiful, really great at finding these. Look at how skinny your fingers are. Just amazing. And taking a chance there, putting that thumb inside that hoop. That was a chancy thing to do. I bet he hesitated at that. I'd love to have talked to him. I'd love to have sat down and just had that conversation right there. Did you hesitate, Frank, just in that little loop there? That's quite a tangent there we're fighting with. I bet he did. Beautiful.
He would have loved that question, that you noticed that.
Yeah, I think so. And look at all that rocky beauty just in there.
I never noticed that, Patrick. I love like all the things that you notice. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So enlightening.
Yeah, well, we're artists, you know. Artists love to talk art. At a party, you know, people would probably just avoid us. But when do we get the chance? When do we get the chance to really love this?
You'd be like talking about lighting in the room. They'd be like, what is this person saying?
Yeah.
Noticing every detail.
Yeah. What it is composition with light, tone, everything. Look at this sfumato again. He just seemed to always make the right choices. And that's what made me think that, yeah, he would have worked fast, but I bet he contemplated tons. I bet most of his process was just thinking about it.
Oh, he said he was exhausted physically after he would do a painting. He was quoted on that a few times. It wasn't like it wasn't really an exhilarating feeling of when he was done. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Now I'm going to go celebrate it. He'd pass out and just, it would take everything from him. So of course he had to, it's all mental. He's going in and out of that thought process of the decisions to make.
Yeah.
From design.
Yeah, it's funny to say that because as if I'm a genius now. I was looking at neuroscience recently there. Well, I was just watching a TED talk, and they were talking about how the brain, the activity of the brain, it produces more power than exercise. They say that when you use your brain like that, it's using all of your energy to think. If you think really hard, you are going to be exhausted. It's actually, even though is it a muscle? It's not a muscle. It takes up all of that, all the energy you've got to work that brain. So Stephen Hawking would have been exhausted, sitting in his chair thinking about the universe, you know, just burnt out. You can burn out thinking. You need to step back a little bit and take some time off. But gorgeous here. I would have probably here in this one. I know it's quite sexual, the idea of it. I don't think that would fit in there. I would have thought he would have put it around here. So it would have been a moment as well to ask Frank, what was he doing? I think he was being salacious a little bit there. I saw, Sarah made me laugh, that there was a little quote from you and you said he was a sex addict.
Wait, where was that? In the book?
I don't know where it was. I think it's in the book. Yeah,
Oh.
I think it's in the book.
Oh,
And it made me
God.
laugh. It made me laugh when I read it.
He was. I mean, that was his. Everyone has a vice. That was his vice. I'm like, I'm gonna be honest about the way who he was, and you can't see that in his art. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with you if you can't see that.
Well, snakes everywhere, isn't there? There's snakes everywhere.
Well, right. There's snakes and they don't have snake heads in some of the paintings.
Right.
I'll just tell you that.
Oh, that's
Like,
interesting.
oh, it's got a snake body, but it's mixed with a hybrid again. Here we got all these hybrid things in the artwork.
I'm gonna have to relook at those snakes again.
Yeah, I'll give you some of those too. It's funny. It's it's his National Lampoon cover. 1967 National Lampoon cover. That's the one to look at. Oh,
okay.
Yes.
1967.
Some people get very offended by that by the real history. I'm like, why are you upset? I mean, I guess I'm crushing that hero. You know, he was a perfect family man. That mythos, you know, around him as like, oh, he was just like the greatest dad and greatest husband, and then no. No, he was amazing. I mean, he's a freaking genius. He's so much cooler than just that. Not taking away from a family man, down to earth, like, you know, heartfelt guy that's just real loyal to his family and his kids and attentive. That's beautiful, but that's not Frank Frazetta.
Yeah,
he's thinking about women, butts, of all kinds.
We're getting all the insights today.
He's thinking about cameras and golf and baseball. That's what he was thinking about.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, if he didn't, you know, let's say he was a sex maniac, it helped him to understand anatomy. There's no doubt about that.
It helped him know movement. I mean, you see how the girls are in the paintings, and it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. He's seen that a few times.
Yeah, they were trying to lampoon someone on Instagram. It's just nonsense, you know, like young guys thinking nobody's lived before them, and they bring some big booty girl in. I'm ashamed even repeating it because I shouldn't even be looking at nonsense like that. It's ridiculous. And
sometimes we can't help ourselves.
Can't help it, you know, you gotta go, it's too ridiculous. And, you know, she comes into the gym and the old guy's sitting there, and then he sees this big booty girl and he goes, what the hell? You know, who dresses like that? And then the boyfriend comes in and he goes, what are you looking at, man? You know? And the old guy says, I've seen it all before. You know? You couldn't lampoon him at all. You know, as if he was going to be embarrassed. Ridiculous.
Yeah, what? No.
So Frankie's seen it all before. And that's why it's so great. Look at that. Oh, geez, so brilliant. So absolutely brilliant. Oh, I could look at his work I will look at his work for the rest of my life. It is just a marvel, an absolute marvel. When you said, like, sir, he was exhausted afterwards, I can only imagine by just going through this beauty of it and feeling what he felt at the time, how he was totally invested. Just must have been totally 100%. Nothing else could distract him at this point. I can't imagine it, that he's going through and making all these brilliant choices all the time.
He would put on that classical music. He was in his studio at night and no one disturbed him. He was so focused. I've said it before, like just even regarding like when we would watch movies together or go on nature walks or whatever, any time we spent together, he always had his undivided focus on whatever was going on in the room. Or a one-on-one conversation. He was a really good listener and he really paid attention. And that does show in his artwork. And there's not many people that I encounter that can really like focus and they're not in their head. And my grandpa was not in his head when he was interested in something. So yeah, he was definitely in that moment. Like I wanted to comment on that earlier when you were like, yeah, he was really present. He was. And it's interesting that you can really pick that up.
Yeah. That's a well lived. For me, that's living
Yes.
every moment. That's living every moment of your life. So yeah,
That's the goal.
I do worry that, you know, people aren't getting the life they deserve because of the internet. You would think it would
Yeah.
give us more, and it's given us less. It's actually the algorithms are narrowing us down into the basic want rather than the exploration that we could be, you know, achieving with our you know, inquisitive nature is being narrowed down to here's what you like and here's more of it. It's quite a scary thing to think about. I mean, we're
I
regressing.
find the internet, it's like, it's a double-edged sword. So personally, when I'm using the internet to get resources and have creative inspiration and connect and build, it's great. When I'm scrolling or doing something mindless, it is the worst, or shopping, or just it's hell. So it's like you have to just be really, really discerning of your time on the screen and the device. And if you're doing things like, you know, I don't know, just looking at other people's lives, that's equivalent to like reality TV. You're going to put holes in your brain. Now, if you're using it to to learn, and I'm talking about myself, I've used it in a very poor way for a very long time. I think mine was, you know, growing up on MySpace. I don't know if you remember that, Patrick.
I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in high school when that came out. I mean, I was an AIM chatter in 7th grade, but it was always about, like, you know, the other people, like, what are your peers doing? How can you be better? Like, it's always like a competition. So I see, like, the internet, it's poison, but it's also the coolest thing, because look, we get to connect right now, and we would never be able to sit here and be together back in the 70s. And I think, you know, that I don't know, my grandpa was filling up his time with bad things too at times, and he didn't have the internet. So we just have to have that freaking discipline, that timer, you know, okay, no more scrolling. Do something good for your brain.
I know.
You know, like a zapper or something.
Yeah, they call it doom scrolling now, don't they? I had a friend
scrolling.
When the internet came out, I had a friend, and he was just fascinated by it. And he was called Gary Bullock, and he's a really lovely guy. And he kept saying, it's a super information highway. And I went, what are you talking about, Gary? Slow down. He says, super information highway's coming. I says, what is that? I just imagine a highway and there was information flying down it in trucks or something. He says, it's coming soon, super information highway. And I kept looking for it, and I couldn't find it, the super information highway. And he meant the internet. It was never called that, but for Gary, that was what it was, the super information.
I like that.
Yeah. And it was never really used the way it should have been. But I use it that way. I definitely, I love Hey Google, because I don't get caught up. There's no doom scrolling with her. I just ask her and she tells me. And that's dangerous too, because I'm using learned helplessness again. You know, I'm just asking and I'm getting it. It's just fed into me like a big toddler.
It's the charm, though. You just go with it. That's fine. You're producing gorgeous art. You get to have that luxury.
I'll have that. Yeah. Thanks, sir. I'll keep on then.
Yeah. You need to free up your time to keep painting.
Yeah. Well, that's how I see it too.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at a later piece, I consider anyway. I think this was the 90s, Sarah. Have you any idea about the time on this one?
Yeah, that one was the late 80s. That was his one of his L. Ron Hubbard pieces. So they commissioned him for, I believe, 6 pieces. And at the time, I mean, he was really adamant on never giving the originals to the publishers, and but they paid him so well that he actually gave them all the originals, and didn't even think twice of it. He was like, "Oh, you're going to pay me that? You can keep them." And that's how they ended up buying Boca Grande Place, the building that the museum's in now, and they bought a condo. So they started living a little bit. We wanted to buy their kids' houses. So I think it was just an offer they couldn't turn down at the time because of the situation and where they were at in their life.
Oh, and who were the publishers? Who was that?
It was Writers of the Future. So L. Ron Hubbard. So when he did
right.
those,
I was going to say,
yeah.
I was going to say, who has those pockets in publishing? I get it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So the money wasn't coming from a publishing company. It's
No.
coming from Scientology. Right.
Yes. But he was not affiliated with Scientology. He was agnostic. He wasn't
Yeah.
affiliated with anyone.
That's very interesting to hear. I didn't know that, Sarah. I didn't know he was agnostic. That's very impressive. That's very impressive. That's me. That's me canceled. That's me. I'll edit that one sentence out.
That's very
He's saying, you heathen. You worship false idols. I don't know. I'm just keeping my options open. But look at the oh God, I'm in trouble. Look at that lovely Sartorius there, Rachel. Changing the subject. Look at that lovely Sartorius there, Rachel. Don't you love it?
Oh, I see it. Beautiful.
Look how rocky he's made it.
I see it.
Yeah. And coming over to the other side here, there I've totally nobody can remember what I said a second ago. Marvelous. There's all the adductors in there. No, that was a revelation. That's why I couldn't believe I heard you say that. That's amazing. It's amazing. I would have totally thought the opposite. I thought, because you often hear Frank being conservative, and I thought, well, conservative, then, just expect he's going to church every Sunday morning. That was surprising.
And he wasn't really concerned. I mean, like, not to get into politics, but he never voted ever. Not that that's a positive thing, but it's to show how he did not care, how checked out he was in terms of politics. But once in a while, maybe there was a hot topic going on and he'd be interviewed at that time. And then they'd ask him a political question and he'd make a comment about it. But overall, he would just say, they're all liars and I want nothing to do with it. So that's where Frank Frazetta stood with politics.
It seems
and
like...
as I get older, I'm the same way. I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done being fooled. I'll vote, but I'm done. Like, really having hope at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, the two news channels. I used to watch one and then the other just to see what the bad guys were doing. And then I went back to the other. I'm like, you know what? Both of you just want to shut up.
Yeah.
I don't watch any of them now. I just cut them off.
No. Yeah, it's boring at this point. I'm like, oh God, more doom. Okay.
It is.
Nothing on the news but the Blues. Keep it off.
Good one, man. No, we've lost our train of thought, haven't we? I think Rachel was going to ask a question, but I might be mistaken. Rachel, did you anticipate?
I was just saying, I've been reading those quotes you put up on Instagram of him. It seems like honesty was pretty important to him, so I can see why he would just throw all politicians and nonsense out. It's just like, because
he just felt like, well, yeah, and he felt like this life is too short, like we were talking about before. Like, if you're doom scrolling or feeding into that, I mean, you are cutting off the time that you have here. We don't know how much time we have, not to be morbid, but it's just, that's how he always felt. And he was like, if I want to experience as much positive, and it's like, for a while, I like personally, an anecdote, like I was really invested for a while, and then I kind of checked out, and then I checked back in, and I'm like, well, nothing changed besides my happiness. Like I'm able to focus on other things, and it's always been like that. So yeah, honesty was really important to him in art and everything, and that's exactly why he didn't like politics.
Wow. Okay, that was very interesting. No, it was great insights from Sarah there, and wonderful. Wow, it's amazing what we found out about Frank we hadn't heard before. So I'd love to have Sarah back at another time, but I feel like I'm always asking Sarah to come back. And Sarah, you feel free to say, look, Patrick, this is the last one. 3's good. We're done on 3. But,
no, I'm gonna come back. We're just all becoming friends now. Why would I stop?
Okay. Are we all on board with that, guys? Are we all good to come back again?
I mean, as long as you guys want me back again. Like,
always.
I'm wanted.
Yeah.
Always want you to come back.
Yeah, I'm always up. Always up.
There's Corey. Corey, have you been sleeping?
There's Corey.
No, I've been chilling. I've really been chilling here. So yeah.
Corey's chilled all the time. I don't know what Corey chilling would be like.
23-year-old Corey who thinks he's old.
Corey on ice.
For
Corey
today,
made me feel really old tonight. Corey.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
You put some ice on those joints, Corey. You get some.
Yeah, I bowled my heart out. I left it all out there on the lanes. So.
All right, guys, you're all awesome. Thank you.
All right, everyone.
The kisses.
Yeah. And I'll see you all again. All right, goodbye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.
Happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day.
Oh, happy Memorial Day.